So as many of you know, my dad was a man of few words. It is one of the many things that I inherited from him. Take for instance our birthday calls annually. Hello, happy birthday, thank you. What are you doing today? Not much, maybe dinner out. Oh, okay, good. All right, bye. I would look at my phone log and it would last about 11 seconds. But you know, that's how the helpman rolled. Dad was even more quiet and reserved than I am, picking his moments to speak, crack a joke, tease, and show his love in his own way. Throughout his life, Dad's actions spoke for him. When I met my dad, or more accurately, when my dad met me, he was 29 years old, well into his adult life. He had been in the Army, married, and already had 2 kids. Those closest to our family know that in the years between Danny and my birth, my parents had a baby boy, Peter, who passed away at 5 months. My mom would periodically talk about it and the trauma she experienced. In my 46 years with my dad, he never talked about it. I often wonder if that trauma contributed to his quiet nature. Dad was from a generation of men who are not supposed to talk about grief, anxiety, and fears. That has thankfully changed since the 70s, but I have to wonder how Dad dealt with the grief all his life, a trauma I could sort of understand when I was young, until it took on a whole new level after becoming a father. I can't imagine losing a child, and the fact that both he and my mom continued on to give us a great life is nothing short of miraculous. To know my dad is to know he loved many things: fishing, trains, Clint Eastwood movies, westerns, old TV shows, and of course, his beloved Ted. His place in this world was outdoors, whether it's tinkering in the garage or camping. He first loved going to his parents' cottage in Canada, then to pop up an RV camping with his dogs at the KOA, Walden Woods, and then Lake Chemung. When Ford would shut down for several weeks in the summer, we wouldn't see much of Dad as he moved to the camper. The times camping with him and I were some of my favorite moments. Walks, campfires, steaks on an open flame, Tigers baseball on the radio. Dad loved his Detroit and Michigan sports. Now, make no mistake, he wasn't the type that would call into local sports talk radio to complain about another wasted Lions draft pick or to lament about the Tigers' decades-long rebuilding cycle. Dad was not a rah-rah guy. He wouldn't get overly excited or disappointed visually, but you could tell he cared. Detroit sports has long been down, but Dad did get his share of championships during his life. 3 Michigan football titles, 8 Red Wings Stanley Cups, and 2 Tigers World Series. Yes, Dad never got to see a Lions Super Bowl. I doubt any of us ever will. But Dad was around for 3 of the Lions' 4 titles that came before the Super Bowl era, including the most recent in 1957. He remembered being 9 years old and the family gathering with neighbors in the alley on Beechman Street in Detroit to listen on the radio to the victory. Dad understood how much the Lions meant to me, sadly, and I am thankful he shared this memory with me. One thing you may not know about Dad is that he was a collector, and most of those collections were to benefit the family. First up was Hot Wheels, where he would buy 1 or 2 for me and my sister every store he went into. He would paint them underneath, blue for me, red for Danny. I still have them in my garage and they number in the hundreds. Next, he would collect Campbell Soup labels from the Ford glass plant. He'd neatly clip them in groups of 50 and send them with us to school. Our teachers used to fight over who would have us in their classes because they'd always win the competition. In 2nd grade, my 2nd grade teacher was so overjoyed about winning that she asked me where my favorite restaurant was, and I said Arby's, of course. Kind of still is, sadly. One day during school lunch, we got in her car and drove and had lunch at Arby's. Now, as someone who works in education today, I cannot stress enough how that would not happen today. Another thing Dad would collect was toilet paper. Yes, toilet paper. When he'd get out of his midnight shift at work, he'd always stop at one of his favorite places, the grocery store, to buy toilet paper. In our basement bathroom, we had this arch of toilet paper over the toilet. Oh, and it was 1980, so it was the time when they sold colored toilet paper. So not only did we have an arch of toilet paper, we had a rainbow arch of toilet paper. So Dad would also borrow stickers from Ford. These were stickers that said okay on them to place on parts as they passed down the assembly line. But you would see these stickers on light posts and signs all throughout town, and then we knew Dougie had been there. This was an example of a prank that Dad liked to pull, and I used to like to pull some on him as well. When we got our first computer, I realized that you could put on a scrolling screensaver. Me being me, I put this computer will self-destruct in 30 seconds. So a few days go by, I forget about it until Mom told me, I'm gonna kill you. Dad told me the computer was gonna blow up. I can imagine how that conversation went. Patty, the computer says it's gonna blow up. When I got a job at Dad's favorite place, the grocery store, of course, just 2 blocks from our house, I think he was overjoyed. Working at a supermarket is pretty mind-numbing, so my friend Sean and I used to play pranks on customers, such as placing fake dollars in the aisles and putting voided display-only lotto tickets in the parking lot. Who was the person that would fall for those gags every time? You guessed it, Dad. Another reason he loved the grocery store so much is that it was his side hustle. You see, in Michigan, they have 10-cent deposit and returns on cans of bottles, so he was constantly scouring trash cans of parts for extra income. Dad was also known to stick his finger in the payphone change containers and vending machines hoping for treasure. Understand that when we grew up, we had a very comfortable middle-class lifestyle despite these habits. We had nice stuff, we went on vacations, but Dad just always wanted the best for us. That want for us to have a comfortable living is one of the reasons that Dad was one of the hardest working people I've ever known. I didn't know much about what he did at the plant, but I knew he was always there. If he took a sick day, you knew he was really sick. Mom often tells me you work too much, but to that I say, well, I learned that from Dad. For much of my childhood, he worked midnights, which meant Danny and I stayed with my aunt and Nana after school until he woke up for his day around 3 p.m. to pick us up. Did you know that my dad used to drink and drive with us in the car? It's true. I told Nana this and she was very upset, as you can imagine. But what I failed to grasp, however, is that it's not drinking and driving if someone is driving while drinking a Pepsi. So, yeah, I got him in a little bit of trouble for that. The days that Dad was not working or sleeping on Saturday mornings, we had a ritual. We would watch black and white westerns in the basement of my first house in Silver Lane. First up would be Sky King, followed by The Lone Ranger, and then The Rifleman. For both me and Dad, our favorite of these was The Rifleman. No matter how many times we watched, Dad would laugh like crazy and point out how Chuck Connor's eyes looked during the opening credits after shooting and spinning the rifle, often using a colorful F word to describe what the character of the show was likely thinking at that moment. It was these moments as a young kid that I realized what an amazing dad that I had. My understanding of the world was forming at that time, and it was these moments that I first realized my parents wouldn't be with me forever. And I remember not even imagining a world without him. Dad and I love trains. Understand that neither of us were gearheads. We cannot tell one locomotive from another. We love to watch and hear them. For him, this started in Canada, where trains went by feet from the cottage. After moving to Florida, we discovered a place just past the Georgia border that sees 40 to 50 trains go by daily, and we'd stay feet from the tracks as an annual Father's Day trip. This past May, we scheduled a Folkston trip for the first time in several years. A few weeks prior, Dad was informed that his lung cancer had come back. As quiet as he was throughout his life, he became even more quiet. It's almost like Dad accepted the fate before him. I will cherish those 3 days in Folkston and May forever. Kelsey and Logan joined us. We might have had a little too much Jack Daniels one day. Dad was very talkative and funny. I truly believe that was the highlight of his final year. He loved those trains and he loved those grandkids so much that it was perfect for him. I will wrap up with a quote from one of Dad and I's favorite classic TV shows, MASH, that reminded me of our relationship. While waiting on a call back on the health of Hawkeye's father, Charles and Hawkeye talked about their paternal experiences. Charles described his father as kind, but he stated, "When I see the warmth, closeness, the fun of your relationship, my dad's a good man. He always wanted what was best for me. But where I have a father, you have a dad. For 46 years, I had a dad. Best dad there was. I will love and honor his memory forever." Thank you.